All right, to discuss this further, we're now being joined by Daniel Rubenstein from Tel Aviv. He is the current Israeli citizen spokesperson, former advisor to Prime Minister Netanyahu, and former advisor to former Prime Minister of Israel, Naftali Bennett. Mr. Rubenstein, thank you so much for joining me here on the broadcast. Mediators say the success of the deal would depend on Israel and Hamas acting in good faith. Now, that's a major variable. How stable or volatile do you feel this deal is going to be?
In the long term, it is hard to see how this kind of deal can be stable for a very simple reason. The stated goal of Hamas, which was reiterated yesterday by a Hamas leader, the stated goal of Hamas is the destruction of Israel. Hamas is saying that it wants to carry out more massacres like it did on October 7th until Israel is destroyed. So I find it very strange that it's written or considered in this agreement that there will be a permanent ceasefire. A permanent ceasefire is completely against what Hamas stands for and what it brags about openly. I think Hamas is playing the long game, and Israel will need to play the long game too and be very careful.
Mr. Rubenstein, details of the second and third phases, though they're understood to be agreed in principle, are to be negotiated during that first phase, which is going to last about 42 days. Now, does that leave scope for hostilities to resume if there is a delay even between these phases?
Yes, there is definitely a place for hostilities to resume. This is a very fragile hostage release agreement. The agreement does not see all of the hostages released. As you mentioned, it is a phased deal. So the first phase calls for the release of 33 Israeli hostages who have been in Gaza in underground tunnels, captive in family homes for 15 months. These people will be released over a period of time, and what Israel will do in exchange is release Palestinians from Israeli prisons. These are Palestinians who have tried to harm Israelis, who have harmed Israelis, much more dangerous people than the hostages who are being held in Gaza. And if this succeeds, then the negotiations will continue. And it remains to be seen if Israel will completely pull out of Gaza or if Hamas will decide to release all of the hostages. We have to keep in mind that throughout this whole process, Hamas continues to hold hostages. It's holding hostages right now. And as part of this agreement, Hamas is permitted to keep holding hostages until it gets what it wants, which is the complete withdrawal of the Israeli forces from Gaza and a commitment that Israel will not enter Gaza in order to remove Hamas from power, which is one of the stated goals of the entire war from Israel's perspective.
Now, as per Israel, reports have suggested that some parts of the framework are yet to be finalized, but the deal is scheduled to start hours from now. It's on Sunday. Do you feel there was a rush to make the announcement of the deal?
I feel that some of the parties to this agreement were certainly more eager than others to come out and say that it had been finalized. It's quite notable that the Israeli Prime Minister himself has not come out and said we have a final deal. But the Qatari mediators, if that's what we can call them, I think they were much more on Hamas's side. The United States, Egypt, others have come out and said a deal was agreed to. So it's safe to assume for now that some type of outline has been agreed to. There may be some details to work out before the implementation phase begins.
Mr. Rubenstein, while we're still awaiting, an official statement from Israel, as of now, going by what has been released regarding the deal, Israeli forces will reduce their presence in the Philadelphia corridor between Egypt and Gaza and withdraw fully by the 50th day. Now, the Philadelphia corridor, it has been pivotal in the past as well. How do you feel Netanyahu agreed to this, as he was defiant on this point for months on not withdrawing from the corridor?
Yes, so the Prime Minister, through his spokesperson, issued a statement saying that Israel has not agreed to withdraw from this corridor, and certainly that appears to be true throughout the first phase of the terms that have been published. Phase one of the deal does not have Israel withdrawing from this border region between Gaza and Egypt. This is a border that otherwise Hamas would control if Israel wasn't there. It appears that Israel did agree to withdraw from population centers throughout Gaza and a corridor that was bisecting northern Gaza and southern Gaza. So perhaps one of the things that's being negotiated, the little details, is what exactly are the major population centers and how far is a zone from the major population centers that maybe would include the border between Gaza and Egypt. But in the meantime, Israeli forces will remain on the Philadelphia corridor, as it's called, and a further withdrawal will be contingent on Hamas's behavior and release of the hostages that it's holding.
So a lot of what is to come is contingent on what happens in the next 6 weeks. So there is a lot of fluidity in this plan. There's nothing which is short that this is what's going to happen and this is what will follow. It leaves a lot of scope for things to only develop, and hopefully it'll develop for peaceful purposes going forward. I want to quickly get one more reaction from you, sir. Trump has also claimed full credit for this ceasefire deal. But US State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller praised the critical role of Trump and his team in brokering the agreement between Israel and Hamas. Do you feel the agreement is a win for the incoming president or the outgoing one?
It's clear that the incoming president made this kind of deal a priority. He tweeted a number of weeks ago that there would be all hell to pay if the Israeli hostages were not released from Hamas captivity by the time he took office. So certainly this sparked a sense of urgency among some of the players in the region, such as Hamas, Qatar, who didn't want to be on the receiving end of President Trump's wrath. But it is worth noting that the hostages will not be released by the time that President Trump takes office. It remains to be seen what all hell to pay actually means, and we'll have to wait and see. On January 20th, 12 noon, East Coast time in the United States is when President Trump becomes the president, and we'll see where things stand.
That was Daniel Rubenstein joining me from Tel Aviv, current Israeli citizen spokesperson, former advisor to Prime Minister Netanyahu. Thank you so much for joining me. Pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you for having me.